Hello, Stampers. Welcome to Learning with Friends. I'm Pat Fairless from Fairless Stamp and Flair, and I'm so glad you're here. We're going to have some fun today with a fairly easy technique, but I'm going to show you a couple different ways to do it. I'm sure you've probably seen this one before. It's called the fractured card technique, and typically it's done with a square image in the center. So that is the easiest one to do, and I'm going to show you how to do that, and then I can also show you how to use it up a little bit. Um, but then I'm going to also show you how to do it with a different shape. And I have several cards. I got a little bit carried away. So I'm going to show you several cards. So hang around, see them all. I am not going to decorate the cards. I'm just going to show you how to do the technique. But then the finished cards will give you ideas on how to decorate. So let's go ahead and switch cameras and get started.
Okay, I am going to show you this card first because this is the type of fractured card. It's also known as a shutter card. You might hear it called that because this thing here in the center kind of looks like a shutter, even more so on a couple of the other shapes. But the best known name, I think, is a fractured card. So I'm going to show you how to do this. So like I said, this is the easiest way to do it, to start with a square element. And I used the stylish shape dies, which are probably my go-to dies that I use more than any others. I hope these stay around forever. They probably won't, but I hope they do. And I used the second largest one, and I've already die cut that. So now we're just going to attach that to the center of our card. And this is designer series paper from Bright and Beautiful. So let's go ahead and adhere that. That is our first step. And I'm going to use liquid glue, I hope. Is there some in here? Don't tell me it's empty. That'd be just my thing, right? Let's tap it. Okay. Let me grab a new one. Thankfully, I had one handy here. Well, this one's probably going to put glue everywhere because it is brand new. A little dry booger off there. All right. Try not to get too much on it. Don't need a lot. Get this close. So I usually put it just a little higher than center. You can put it wherever you want. Doesn't really matter. I've got a little smudge down here, so I'm going to put that at the bottom. But I just try to center it top to bottom with it a little closer to the top, as you can see. So it's probably a little less than an inch from the top, and maybe a quarter, half inch from the side. This is a 5 1/4 by 4, and all of the cards I'm going to show you, that is what I used, just a 5 1/4 by 4. You could certainly use a different size if you chose to do so. You just may want to, already got glue on there, get my glue eraser. You may then just want to adjust the size of this element if you use a smaller piece of paper or a larger. So now the first step is we can start on any side, but I'm going to lay this across here just so that I can see where I want to butt up my next piece. Okay, so I'm going to add a little glue on here, and let me get a little more room on my silicone mat. This is something you will probably, oh yeah, lots of glue when you got a brand new one. And we don't really need a lot of glue. So that's why I kind of wanted to use the empty one, but of course, when you want to do something, it doesn't always turn out that way, right? All right, get a little bit there at the end. Okay, a little bit too much. I'm going to kind of drag some of this down without getting more on here if I can. Normally I would just take my finger and swipe it down, but Then I got gluey fingers. So this is just a guide on here to kind of see where to butt this up against. All right, and then we're just going to glue that down. Now I'm going to rotate this, and we're just going to do this all the way around. So, see if I can get a little less glue this time. It's not like you need a lot. There's not a lot of anything that's tugging on this. These strips are 1/4 inch wide, and for this one with a square, a little fuzz on there. There we go. With a square, I want to push that up against there. You need 4. Now I could cut these off and use some of the pieces, but sometimes it's just easiest to just have. Who doesn't have a lot of scraps of little strips that you can easily cut many 1/4 inch strips, right? We all got lots of scraps. And this is a great way to use some of those little narrow ones. So push it up against the next one, lay it on the edge, and just adhere it down. And one more. Some glue on there without getting too much. Okay. And that basically is the hardest of it. Now we're just going to snip these off, flip it over, and just use the piece of designer series paper as your guide to snip these off. And we will get rid of these since they have glue on them. And that basically is the simple version of a fractured card. Now, you may see some out there where the designer series paper in these corners is different. So I'm going to show you the easiest way to do that. I have a couple of coordinating pieces here, and we can put these anywhere we want, really. We can do it like that. We could put them on this side, whatever we want. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to do it like this. My other card my finished card that I just showed you, I had them on the top. And you can certainly just leave it like this. Many cards that are out there, that is exactly how they do it, is they just leave it like this. And I'm just going to put some coordinating, and again, this is all from Bright and Beautiful. So we'll just put a little liquid adhesive on here, and just lay it in there, butt it up against the strips. And you could do this on every corner. These are just scraps. They can be any size. Just make sure they're big enough to cover the corner. And you do not want that right where I got that. Okay, get it close enough so it holds it at the edges. And we'll stick that in there. Now again, we're going to trim this off by flipping it over, and we could cut this by hand or we could use our paper trimmer. Doesn't really matter, whatever works easiest for you is fine. We will just lay the edge of, I'm going to lay the edge of the designer series paper along the crease, which is a little hard to see sometimes. That I have it lined up, and I didn't exactly, so I don't know if I can adjust that little smidge off there. I probably could have more easily done that with my scissors, my paper snips. And we'll get this side. here we go again. I'm going to line as much of this up as I can and pray that it's straight down here. If not, it's a little over, so we can come back and trim that. Now it's easier to see the next one. If you prefer, just trim them all with your snips and use the guide of the designer series paper, or use this designer series paper as the guide to just trim right along there. Sometimes I think that's the easiest, but a lot of people don't like doing that, so I thought, well, I'll at least show you. So you can see now we have, we could also make this way, we could make it this way, it doesn't really matter. But that was how I did this card here, and I used the Hooray for Surprises stamp set. This one I actually used some different Bright and Beautiful designer series paper. I have the dots, and this is different. Here I did use the Parakeet Party kind of a color wash. But you can see it's basically the same card, right? And this was made with this Hooray for Surprises. I used a couple of these flowers, just stamped them. There's dies that go with this. That makes easy work of cutting them out. There's some greenery that comes in some dies there, so I just tucked those under and put a sentiment here in the center for a birthday card. And this is also from that same set. I used a strip of this, my base designer series paper. Obviously, I could have picked one of the other ones, whatever I had a scrap of is what I used, and then did the same on the envelope. This was the Parakeet Party from up here. And this was all I had left of my 6x6 piece, so I just put that across the flap. So that is the first card. That is the easiest one to do. Not that the others are hard, but that one truly is the easiest. So let me get that out of my way. And I'm going to show you how to do one with the Countryside Corners dies, which are hexagons, not true hexagons, but they are 8-sided. So they're kind of an elongated hexagon. And I used, in this case, I used 2 of the dies. I used the, these are what these dies look like if you're not familiar with them. I used the, I believe it is the second smallest one here, and then the third smallest one, that one. And let me go ahead and show you how to make your fractured card out of this. So I could set that aside. I did my stamping and stuff, so you didn't have to watch me stamp. But I'm gonna attach this to the center of my designer series paper. This designer series paper is from the Fresh as a Daisy, and it is one of the, there's 2 sheets in there that have some background shapes already, multiples on one sheet of paper. So this is just one of those. I hadn't used it yet. I'd had this paper for quite a while, but I haven't really used those. So I thought, well, let's try it. And this, so it's got Pretty Peacock and Wild Wheat. I didn't really know what color to put in the center that went with it. I'm like, well, Wild Wheat, that is one of the 23, 25 in colors, so it must go with the rest of those. So I picked Copper Clay here. And again, I am just going to center this on my card. This one I pretty much am going to center as best I can just by eyeballing it. Okay. All right. And now we are going to do kind of the same thing. So I'm going to start here and lay one across the top as a guide. But the difference is here, now they're not going to butt up corner to corner. So you sort of have to lay this on there and then just take your paper snips, eyeball it, and cut it along that edge. And that's what I wanted to show you with this. You want to do that to get the angle close. If it's not exact, it's not gonna hurt, okay? So you can see that's pretty close to that angle. I could probably pick this up, and by eyeballing it, I could see I maybe needed to trim just a little more off from there. And then we'll butt it up against and see how that goes. So that looks pretty good. Let me get my silicone mat back in here and get some glue on there. And for this one, I needed 8 1/4-inch strips because I have 8 sides on my hexagon. And again, I'm just using this to eyeball it and get it lined up correctly. And then we'll lay that down. A little extra glue there. That's the advantage of a liquid adhesive, is you can move it around and get it lined up. So now this is much easier when I can actually hold this and take it down and have my nose right against it, right? As opposed to being a foot away. But if I put my nose over it, you won't be able to see. So again, I am going to cut along that edge of that and line it up that way. So now we will add again some glue. This one I think actually does look more like a shutter than the square ones, because a shutter has more sides than a diamond or a square, right? And I think if I had a true hexagon die cut where all sides were equal, I think that would really look a lot like a shutter card. But this is kind of interesting too. So, all right, now the next side, we're just going to lay it on there again. And we need to do this on each side or each corner as we work our way around. Just snip that off. My hands are getting gluey. My fingers. They want to stick. I do have my hand sanitizer here. I should probably take a minute and get some of this glue off my fingers. So it wants to pull it up. If you haven't tried hand sanitizer to get glue off your fingers, it works really, really well. I don't know why, but it does. My hand sanitizer doesn't even have any alcohol in it, so I'm not sure what's in it that's taken off the glue. But something is. Okay, here we go. One more side. Get that little piece on there. And lay that against there. Snip along the edge. Some glue. Push that in there a little bit more. All right, I think we are over halfway done, right? So, again, and I have to turn this back to be able to cut better, or see where I have to cut. All right. When I have to cut, it helps if I look down the edge here. So here, like straight on is the easiest from my angle, because it's very easy then to eyeball down the edge of the previous strip. But that's what I kind of wanted to show you with, if you want to use a different shape other than a square, and you do have to think about these angles a little bit. Now you could overlap them. What I would probably want to do is tuck them underneath seeing them all on the top might look a little strange, I'm thinking. I don't know. Boy, I really wish my empty glue thing had enough glue in it to not have this gooshing out everywhere. Oh, no, I'm one short. I might be one short. Well, let's cut one of these off. There we go. Now we have it. Guess I didn't count very well when I was cutting. I'm sure that wasn't the first time, and it will definitely not be the last. All right, scissors, get under there. Some of them give me less trouble than others. I don't know why that is. I probably got flustered because I was short on the little strip. And then I lost my concentration. Just kidding. I don't know. Things happen, right? We just have to learn to go with the flow. And I am not necessarily a real go with the flow kind of person. I sort of like things to go right the first time. But with card making, that is just not always the case. Okay, last one. We're going to make it. You're probably thinking, did she really need to show us all 8 of these? Probably not. You probably figured it out after the first 2. Okay, so those are pretty well stuck down. My little snips out of the way. And let's go ahead and flip it over and cut these off. The little short ones are definitely easier to do with the snips than a paper trimmer. I would not mess with a paper trimmer trying to do these. That would just be a waste of time. Unless I didn't have a scissors, I guess. Okay, so that is with a hexagon. You can see the fractured card looks a lot different, right? I'm going to go ahead and put this on here, and I'm going to pop that up with some dimensionals. And you can see I have my dimensionals covered with my highlighter. A trick I learned from Sharon Armstrong at one of the Creative 8 quarterly retreats. Such a good idea. So you can always see when you have one pulled off or if you forget one. Because I often, when you have several, you forget them and then you put it down and now it's like, oh, one of them's not stuck, and then you're under there digging, right? This particular stamp here, Trust in the Lord with All Your Heart, is from this Courage and Faith stamp set, which I absolutely love. I love these verses, but if you look closely, they all include the Bible verse that they came from. And so this is Proverbs 3, verse 5. But in this particular die cut, there was not enough room. So in order to make it fit, what I did was I masked off the verse with a piece of Post-it note before, and you could use any kind of low-tack tape, and then ink this up and then remove that and then stamped it. Now, these are also cling stamps, which means they're rubber, not see-through, and getting that within this border was a little tricky. So what I did was, who remembers a Stamp-A-Ma-Jig, or who still has a Stamp-A-Ma-Jig? This is a Stamp-A-Ma-Jig. Stampin' Up! Used to sell these. They don't anymore as they move towards photopolymer. We don't really have that much use for them. But believe me, I hang on to mine. And for times like this, where you just want to fit something little and you don't have a lot of room for error, this thing comes in really handy. Now, what you could also do is, if you didn't have this border on here, and the border is from the Countryside Border stamp set, or stamp set, a stamp set made of one stamp. I color, and I use this second smallest one here, which is just the little dots. I colored that with a Wild Wheat Stampin' Write marker, because if you ink this whole thing, you get the center one too, even though I was die cutting this. So I selectively colored this with the brush end of my marker and then stamped it onto the very vanilla cardstock. And so I already had, and then I die cut it. So I already had that border on there. And that's why I used my Stamp-A-Majig. Now, if you have one of these, you know how handy these come in. But these are great little tools. And what you do is you set this on the corner of this sheet that is part of the Stamp-A-Majig. And then you lay your stamp in this corner. Or your block in the corner, and you stamp it on here first. And then you can take this back and you can lay it exactly where you want to stamp. Put this back here in that corner, and then you can put your block in there and it'll come exactly where you want it to be. So those are probably still available on Amazon or something somewhere. I know Stampin' Up! Unfortunately does not sell those anymore. And like I said, with the onset of photopolymer stamps, not really probably a high use for them, but if you have one, I know you're hanging on to it for the same reason I did, because sometimes you just need a little help getting something lined up, right? So I'm just going to now put this front that we just completed, this fractured card front, on my Wild Wheat card base. And the one thing I didn't mention is, with this technique, you want your strips to be the same color as your card base, because that's what it looks like to tie it in. But don't put your designer series paper on your card base until after you have your fractured strips on there, because now if it was already on your card base, it would be very difficult to trim those. You couldn't just turn over the designer series paper. So that's a couple hints. And this looks a little crooked. My anal self needs to straighten it out. Okay, that's better. And we could put, I don't know, does it need some zhuzhing up? I have some Wild Wheat dots here. Maybe we just put a couple of these on the card somewhere. I'm not sure where I'll put them. I don't know. They say to put things in threes. I'm going to use the big ones. And they are sticking to my gluey fingers. I should have take my pick tool, but I don't. So let's just put one here. And maybe we'll put the other one right about over here. Okay, gives it a little bit of bling. Sometimes we just need a little bit of sparkle. So that is the other shape I was going to show you. Now let me show you the other cards that I've made. The other card I made with this shape, I didn't use the Countryside Corner dies, but I used our hexagon, heartfelt hexagon punch. So I wanted to see if I could do it with that. Now these have a little bit of rounded corners, but it turned out fine. And this one is also with Bright and Beautiful and the Hooray for Surprises stamp set here. So you can just see I decorated this simply with this little cake is in the Heartfelt Surprises. The hearts are, the flower is. Great stamp set. Shout out to Cat Beyond Us. Thank you for pointing it out to me in the catalog, because I totally had overlooked it. So this is this card. Again, I just did it the same way with a strip of the same designer series paper. Now, on the first card where I showed you the same designer series paper, we added some colors here in the corners, right? Well, I was going to sort of try to do that. It's this one here where we added on the square one. This is very easy to do with square, to add some other designer series paper on here. With these, when you don't have the square shape in the center that you turn into a diagonal, these are not easy to make into different shapes. So I was going to do that at first, and I'm like, oh, that's just way too much work because these are all at weird angles. So you can't just take a square piece of cardstock and stick it in there and then trim the outside. You got to figure out this angle, and that was way more effort than I wanted to do. So that was this is a 6-sided square. Here we had 8. But you can see how the fractured card works. And I did another, this one is also 6-sided. This is from the Nested Essentials dies, and it's the second largest one. I wanted to make kind of an elegant card. So in this case, I used the Bedazzled Designer Series paper, or More Dazzle. I think it's called More Dazzle. And just kept everything sort of monochromatic. The background was embossed with I think it's called layered florals, 3D layered florals embossing folder. And then these are embossed, heat embossed with gold embossing powders. This flower here is from Lifetime of Love, which is this stamp set here. It's this stamp down here. And so that is another card with another shape. And look at the inside. I had strips, tiny little strips left over. So I embossed a message, heat embossed it, and added a couple more scraps of strips. So that is card number 4. I guess we could call card number 5 if we count this one, which isn't a card yet, but it will be. And then my last card I'm going to show you was also done with the Countryside Corners dies. And this is kind of a more colorful, fun card compared to this one, for example. This is done with the Filled with Happiness bundle, which uses this modern oval punch. And the paper on here is, what is it called? Masterfully Made Designer Series paper. This is the punch I used. It's a modern oval, and this is the stamp set. I believe this is an online exclusive. Don't hold me to that. It's hard to remember where everything is these days, but nice and colorful, pretty birthday card, I thought. The background here in the pretty peacock, I did have to fussy cut this, but this was just quickly punched, and these were colored with Stampin' Blends. So those are my collection of cards for today. All right, we made it. That's what I wanted to show you. Let me flip back to the other camera.
And we will wrap this up. I hope you like that. It's fun. It's easy. There's a lot of different ways that you use whatever shape dies you have. Just need straight sides, probably. You saw one with rounded corners on the heartfelt hexagon stamp set or punch. That worked fine. Just slightly rounded corners worked fine. But if you have a fancier or round die or circle die, it's probably not going to work. But anyway, I hope you liked that. If you did, you give me a thumbs up. If you're new to my channel, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. And I'd love to have you subscribe and help my channel grow. And share the video with friends so that we can all learn together, because learning with friends is so much better than learning alone. So I hope you have a great day. We will see you next week with something else. I don't know what it'll be, but hopefully it'll be good and hopefully you'll learn something. So have a good one. God bless.